Look, Montu is the war god. Nefer means good. Hotep is pleased. Ib is heart. Erp is wine. Mat means kitty. Mao is cat. Ra is sun god. Ya is moon god. Ego means oxygen. Hotep can also mean at peace, not just pleased. And Mustafa is kind of like the prerequisite to a pyramid. It's a ceremonial mound that the early kings would build a lot of these things for themselves. And the first king is Narmer Menzies, first pharaoh, first dynasty of Egypt, and he founded Memphis. Then not long comes in the third dynasty you have Zoser, who's given credit for making the first pyramid, and Imenhotep, Imenhotep, is given credit for helping him make that. And he's buried with 1,000,000 birds, okay? And they're mummified birds, and pretty weird, but that's the case. And sarcophagi means flesh eater. This is where sarcophagus comes from, the word. And basically the Egyptians had opened up the sarcophagus and saw that the bodies were being eaten by, the flesh was being eaten. So that's what they named it. Now, Sneferu built the biggest pyramid of all time, and this is after trial and error. And the first pyramids, he was building these pyramids, and he stopped on when he was almost finished, when he realized the angle was wrong, and so he eventually gets it right, and he builds the largest pyramid. Now the boats sailing on the Nile, if they had their sail up, it meant that they're going to Nubia or going south from the Nile. If they had their sail down, they're going up, and they're using the rows and the current to go up because the Nile flows south to north. Okay. Now, just like the sun rises in the east and is set in the west, the kings are buried on the west, and Egyptians live in the east and they're buried in the west. The pharaohs. Okay, now Khufu built the Great Pyramid of Giza, and Herodotus was told in 450 BC that it took 90,000 men, a very long time working on it, for it to be built. Now, as the end of the Old Kingdom comes along, Pepe II, he was the longest reigning monarch in history. He reigned 94 years, and he lived 98 years. He's also called, his throne name was Mary Re, the beloved of Re, etc. Now, eventually what ends up happening is at the end of the old period, we have kind of an intermediate period between the Middle Kingdom and the Old Kingdom, where we start seeing Asiatics showing up at the rivers, and a lot of foreign people showing up, foreign nations, peoples showing up, and people see this as a sign that Egypt is no longer going out and fighting wars, but they've kind of a key part of Egypt, the pharaoh, the religion, and the art, the military. The military is one of the three key things in Egypt. Starts kind of declining, and you see a lot of complaints because of this. So then, in the Dynasty 11, in the Middle Kingdom, when it comes along, they basically have a period of Intef Seretawi, which is causing the peace of the two lands. Okay, and we see the Mantu Hoteps struggling, to get a hold of power, and the 13th and 14th dynasties overlap, And then we go to the 15th dynasty, where the Hyksos kings. Hyksos means foreign kings. Okay, there's no question what these people were not from there. They're foreign kings, and they settle in the Delta, and they worship Set. And they adopt Set, and they worship the Baphomet with a goat head and a tail with a forked tail. This is where we get the idea of a demon. It comes from the Hyksos kings in Egypt, and the worship of the Baphomet. Okay, now eventually the Hyksos are eventually seized. Under siege, not seized, but under siege, and by a guy named Chamos, who, when the Hyksos attempt to send a messenger to the Nubians, Apophos attempts to send a messenger to the Nubians to get help, Chamos intercepts that message, and he continues the siege, and he's about to win the Hyksos, but he dies during the siege, and his brother Amosi the first ends up finishing the siege and expelling the Hyksos. Okay, so in the New Kingdom, we see a period of truth, justice, and divine order. That's what they call it in their language. That's what they label it. A period of Mats, and where Ahmose the first comes, and Amenhotep the first, and Tutmosis, then Tutmosis the second, and Hatshepsut, who, when her husband dies, declares herself a king and is buried in the Valley of the Kings. This is just the beginning of a bunch of heretical moves on this bloodline. When you see Amenhotep the third comes in, okay. Now, the gates are important to Egypt. You know, the pillars. You pass through pillars to reach temples. And this is where you see a lot of Christian references to this. You'll see even Christians references to the Book of Life, the Lamb's Book of Life, they call it. Okay, and then, of course, Akhenaten, the heretic king, comes along. And he builds a new, he takes the capital out of Thebes to a new land, a new kind of temple in the middle of the desert, a new holy city, so to speak. And a lot of people follow him. And he names the city after the Aten. He declares himself the Aten on earth. And he declares that there's only one God and that he is God. And so he's called the heretic king because of it. And he marries Nefertiti. And he dies, Nefertiti, in the sun temples. She builds a temple to the sun gods. And she gets killed in that very temple during the ceremony. And Tutankhamun, King Tut, his son, eventually comes along, the most famous pharaoh. He rules from when he's 8. He dies at 18, and he's buried under 200 pounds of solid gold. His crown is missing. They say, oh, because the crown is passed on is one of the things they say might be why the crown is missing. But they don't know why the wand is missing. Besides, they say grave robbers took it. I believe that maybe the archaeologists took it. The reason why some of these things are missing is not just because of graveyard robbers, but because of archaeologists. Okay, so then his kind of advisor, he's a commoner. He kind of guides King Tut along the way, and then when King Tut's sister, whoever marries her is gonna be the royal heir. She writes letters to the Hittite king and says to bring a prince, and they're kind of natural enemies, so they don't believe him. Hittite king sends someone to investigate. They say, oh, this is the truth. She does want you to send a prince to marry her to become the king. So the Hittite prince comes in an envoy. I is the one who is given credit for ambushing this Hittite king, slaughtering him and all the people he brought with him. And then I ends up marrying the sister of King Tut, and he becomes the pharaoh. And he is kind of a very wise man, and he starts bringing back in the old customs. And he starts undoing a lot of what Akhenaten did, you know. He's one of the people who had stayed in Thebes. He'd stayed in the capital when Akhenaten had left. So then we get Ramses and Seti the first and Seti the second, etc. We get all these other guys. They start coming in, the lines of Ramses, the lines of Seti. These people who worship Set. That's why they're called Seti, after the god Set. And we have a period where the Libyans come in, and I'm going to discuss the Libyan and the Nubian dynasties in the next video. Okay, it took me a lot to upload this video. I actually made this video several times. YouTube was not letting me publish it, and I wouldn't recommend for other people to make videos. You know, it had me very upset at YouTube. And we're going to get into a lot about the Libyans and the Libyan takeover in the next videos to come. And you know, it's just very aggravating to have to make these videos over and over again on YouTube, and that it seems like almost is like they're out to get me. They're out to stop me from releasing my videos, because I felt like the video I made before this was I did a lot better job of articulating, explaining, and now I had to release this one. You know, I'm not gonna make another one for this part 20 because it would be ridiculous. But you know, I hope that was pretty much informative enough.